This is Brian, aka Invisible Doogie, and I am back for another Project Spark tutorial. This one we are tackling Vectors 101, and specifically we are not going to be tackling vector math. We're going to be looking at specifically vector locations for on-screen locations and also for on-map locations. So I anticipate this is going to be a bit of a longer tutorial, similar to my Paths 101 tutorial, so in the details description below for this video, I will let you know at what minute point I start talking about on-screen locations, at what minute point I start talking about on-map locations. So vector locations and using the X, Y, and Z variables are great for specifying an exact point on your screen or on your map where you want things to happen. And to illustrate that, I'm just going to show you how I use that in my game in a few different ways. So first, for the opening cinematics, you'll see Zombie Punch 2 written across the screen right there. Each of those different items is they all have a different on-screen vector position. Where I individually set the X and Y position on the screen, as well as that skip button at the very bottom of the screen. So let's skip the rest of this. And another part where I used on-screen positioning is for a controls list. So if I hold down on the C button, if I'm on my computer, then it shows me this controls list right here. And each of those different items, I individually set their vector position as well, so their X and Y position on the screen to make them all fit as part of this. So now let's go and look at an example of on-map locations. So I'm going to slightly break my game. You're meant to always kill this guy right here, but I'm going to just bypass him so I can die. Being killed by these two swordsmen right here, just because they will kill me a lot faster than someone punching bow. So they're getting me down close to 0 health, and there we go. So I have this screen that happens, and then you are respawned right here at the beginning again, and you can go back out and continue along the game. So let's talk about how I actually did all that. And to do that, we're going to go in a completely blank map so I can walk you through every step of the way. And by the way, everyone who's downloaded my game, thank you so much. I know there are a lot of bugs, especially with the zombie brains. I'm still working on those, but I've really started to get a lift of downloads, so thanks everyone. So let's create an empty world to go into. And by the way, if you have played my game, Zombie Punch 2, please let me know in the comments here on project-spark.org community, or really anywhere, if you run into any bugs, or if they're just, is there anything you think needs to be improved, because it's still in its alpha build. There are a few things that I want to do to make it a bit better. But if you're just here for the tutorial and you don't care about Zombie Punch 2, then let's not focus on that anymore. So actually, before I go into the brain, let's talk about the basics of the X and Y variables for on-screen location. So this is where we talk about on-screen location. So if you remember from math and working with graphs, things were, you had a standard X and Y graph where Y was vertical, equaling up and down. Those were the different points on the Y graph. And then X is the points along a horizontal plane. So, along this horizontal. And this guy is kind of right at screen center. So when you're working with on-screen variables in Project Spark, screen center is equal to the X position of 0 and the Y position of 0. So think of this as the very center of your graph. As you go up to the very top of the screen, this position right here at the very top is equal to Y is equal to 1. The very bottom of the screen here, Y is equal to -1. Similarly for X, if we go to the very far left-hand side of the screen, X is equal to -1. If we go to the far right-hand side of the screen, X is equal to 1. So really, the entire screen you're working within, the highest point you can go is between -1 and 1 for both the X and Y variables. And now this works where it calculates sort of the percentages based on your screen size. So the important thing to note is while on one screen size, 0.5y would be equal to, say, right about here. If you're on a smaller screen size, it might be equal to here. So just know that when you're using specific vector variables, that on different screen sizes, they may look different. For instance, on my game, when you saw the title Zombie Punch 2, if you were to see that on a smaller screen, I'm on a 1080p screen right now, but on smaller screens, those letters actually overlap a tiny bit. So let's start with, we're going to display the number 4. So we go into Create, Interface, Display. We're just going to display the number 4 slightly above the character. So we go to Gallery Picker. See this heart icon right here? This is where you get kind of all the on-screen items. You can also use an effect or a character or a prop, kind of whatever you want to use. So let's click on 4, and let's wait for my computer to catch up with me. So we're going to display this, go to Modifiers, and then we're going to go to the second page, On Screen At, and then we are going to go, oops, that's not the right place. We're going to go to Vectors, Vector Variable. Let's just set this as number 4. So this is telling to display this tile, which is number 4, on screen at position number 4. But we have not set what this actually equals. So let's set that. So I'm just going to copy this. So let's first set its x variable. So we go to Vector Components, go to x. Let's make this simple, and let's make it equal to 0, so the exact center of the screen. And to just speed things up, I'm going to copy this, paste it, and now we switch to its y variable. And let's make this to slightly higher on the screen itself. So let's do 0.4. And now some people, they will make the second line, which is usually the y variable, a child of the first line, just so it's easier to tell when two things are part of one component. It's not necessary to do that. I just keep them at the same, but for visual purposes, sometimes people put one as a child under the other. You can do either one. They both work just as well. So let's switch into this. And now you'll see no matter where you are, the 4 stays in that one position that I just defined for it. So a lot of user interfaces have a background for them. So let's talk about creating that background. So what you do is, let's do Create, Interface, Display. Let's go to Objects, Gallery Picker. Let's go to this heart icon again. And what you want to look for is, once this computer catches up with me, because this computer is showing its age, it's what, 3 years old now? So we find square. And for this, I'm actually going to set screen location as screen center. So it's going to show the square at screen center. And the great thing about this is we can independently set the width and the height of this square. So I'm going to set the width at, let's go over to 17, which that is, I believe that means it's 17 times wider than the average square. And now we can set height. And let's put that to the number 10, which is right here. And now I'm also just going to, for a bit of extra flair, we can set the opacity. So if we choose the number 1, that means there's 0 opacity. If the number 0 means it's fully transparent and opaque. So let's go with 0.5. And now when we switch into this, you'll see the number 4 is over top of a screen. So what I like to do is, when you're working with user interfaces, is actually put those on a separate page. So let's just copy this. Let's put that on page 2. Let's put this on page 2 also. And we don't actually have to get the number variables over to page 2 if we're starting on page 1. So I'm just going to delete this, delete that. Now let's set when the letter, let's just do C. When C, we don't want to do C pressed, and I'll explain that to you soon. Let's do switch page. Next page. Then on the second page, let's do when, let's see if I can find C within here. Here we go. When C is released, then we switch back to the previous page. So what this does is, as I'm holding down C, it's going to always be on this page. As soon as I let go of it, it goes back to the other page. So let's quickly see how that looks like. So let's hold down C, and let's let go of C. And there we go. So now you can add whatever you want onto that second page, setting all of the different variables wherever you want to. It is definitely trial and error, figuring out exactly where in the X variable and where in the Y variable things should go. One important thing to note is when you set an X and Y variable for an item, so say for instance number 4, it's going to put that item in the exact center of it. So say for instance, let's create one last variable, or let's do text4, and let's make the X equal to 0.15, which puts it a bit further than 0. And the Y, we're going to make it the same Y as we had for number 4, because what we're doing is next to the number 4, we are just going to write text that this is number 4. Okay, so now let's insert display. Then we go to values, text, new text. This is number 4. Then we go to on-screen at, and let's just copy this. So now you'd think that, okay, so the X position of text 4 is set at slightly further along than the X position of number 4. So those shouldn't overlap, right? So let's see. So you'll see they pretty much fully overlap. And that is because it's putting an item at the exact center point of where you are setting it. So let's just, I'm just going to copy this over to the second page, just to make it a bit easier to track everything. Okay, let's just delete it from this page. Now you can set once for these because you really only need to know that these positions equal these once. It doesn't matter too much. I mean, I guess once is technically a bit better, so it's not continually checking them. I'm just not going to set it for this time. So let's now set the X to equal 0.14 or 0.4. So let's test this again. And now it's not changing. So why is it doing that? Let's see. Probably you watching realize I did something wrong. I did do something wrong. I set, that's still number 4, not text 4. But you guys probably already knew that. I just didn't see that. Okay, why is it not copying? Copy. Paste, there we go. Okay, so text 4. So let's just make the x equal again so I can illustrate this to you. 0.15. And I messed up again. Okay. I know exactly what I did wrong. I did not set the y. Here we go. So 0.15 actually looks pretty good. Now let's just make that a bit bigger. So on screen and then we're going to set the font size to extra large. Quick note about font size. If you do type on speed for font size, it's not going to let, whatever you set the font size as, it's not going to recognize that, and it's just going to use the default small font size. So if you do a type on speed, just know that. So now you see there's some overlap because we have this a lot bigger. And again, that's because this is number 4. That text is based on the center of where you set it. So because it's quite a wide piece of text, that center doesn't mean that it's not going to overlap with the other items. So this is where you need to play around with items. So I'm just going to set x to 0.4, and I think that's probably going to be too far away. Yeah, it's too far away. So, you know, I could work on this forever, but I won't. But that just gives you an idea of sort of how to set on-screen variables, and you can just continue to do that over and over again. Okay, so now let's talk about on-map variables. So to illustrate this, let's first create a few goblins. And let's just use the clone tool on this guy. I do like it in the Xbox One how you can just, you don't even have to go to clone tool. It automatically clones them for you. Okay, so there are 2 different ways that you can work with on-map variables. You can first manually set all of the X, Y, and Z points, or you can use a position of something to set the X, Y, and Z points. So that's the difference with on-map variables, is it introduces the Z variable. So X is still world up and world down. So higher up in the world has a higher X number, lower in the world has a lower X number. Or sorry, Y, a lower Y number. X is side to side, but Z is forward and backwards. That's what gives things a 3D element. And for most of you, you probably already knew that. So here's what I always like to do. And I actually still have this as a debug, by the way. If you're playing Zombie Punch 2, if you hold the middle mouse button, or I believe D-pad up, I set it as, you'll actually get the exact vector variables of the player at all time. I haven't removed that from there because I'm just still testing a lot of stuff with it. But let's set that. So if you want to set manually where a variable goes, then let's create a new vector variable, and let's just simply call it position. And we're going to make that equal to the player's position, which all I need to do for that is position. So position equals position. Then when, oh wait, we want to do mouse. When middle mouse button, I'm going to do it that instead of press because I want to just show it for as long as I need to. Then we are going to, sorry, not under appearance, under create, going to do display. Position. At position. Me. So let's test this out. So there you go. You will see as I'm running around, it shows me the X vector position, then the y vector position, then the z vector position. So I jump up, shows me the z. So what I tend to do is if I want something to be at specific positions, the nice thing is you can walk around a map and say, for instance, this point right here, you want something to be shown or something to spawn here or something to happen. You can write down that, okay, so this position is negative 53.4. Then that's the x, and the y is 10.04, and the z is 23.33. I rounded up to 2 decimal places. So I'm not going to remember any of that because I'm not writing it down. But let's just say, for instance, you wrote that down and you want something to happen at that position. So let's do how about when you press the number 2, let's do pressed. Then let's make the position equal to new place. Let's just call it that. So now let's set up what new place is equal to. So for this, we do the x variable just like we did last time. So that is equal to, let's just say, negative 53. The y position, let's make that equal to 12. And the z position, this is the new part, is we have z now we have to define. Let's make that also equal to, let's just use 17. Now I have no idea what place on the map this is going to spawn me at, but let's just do number 2, and bam. Then every time I press the number 2, brings me that 1 point. And I press it again, brings me right to that 1 point. So that is what I did to manually set. But manually takes up a lot of time. Manually setting positions for everything is crazy. So one of the things that you'll probably use most often is respawning a player at a position. So what we want to do is create a new vector variable, and let's call this dead. Really doesn't matter what you call it. So let's just do this. So dead also equals position, but when we do once, the great thing about once and the difference between once and non-once is doing this, it's going to only run this line once. So basically, it's going to catalog my X, Y, and Z positioning at the very beginning of the level itself. So I can do this also for enemies to calculate their position at the very beginning of the level itself, so on and so forth. And when I don't have a once, that means that it's always checking for what my X, Y, and Z position is. So that means basically, if you want something to appear at a location of a moving player, then without having the once, it'll appear at that exact position the player is at, right then and there. But we want to do, when I die, I'll go back to my starting place. So we have set this dead position. So now let's actually say what that means. Let's go to the very bottom here. So let's do when I'm dead, then we first want to do my position. is equal to dead. And then we want to revive me. Okay, let's see how this works. So I run up against these goblins. Let's just let them kill me. They're pretty slow about it. This might take a bit of time. I probably should have sped up the goblins. So default in any enemy rain, they have a cooldown time that I think is way too long. Sometimes it's up to a second, which just gets kind of crazy. It just makes it so... I mean, the default enemies are actually really stupid. Maybe in the future, I'll show you guys how to make a smarter enemy, because I've been working on that in my game. I don't know, it's something that people want to do as well, because, I mean, just imagine it's taken this long to kill my player. I could have killed all these goblins by this point. It just makes it not too challenging for the player. Okay, almost there. So close. Come on, you can do it. There we go. So that's how that automatically brought me back to my starting position. And now you can do things with a countdown timer, so it's not instantaneous. I would just make sure also when you're working on that, go to properties, combat. Nope, not under hit reaction, health and defense. I would just always make this, if you're going to have your player respawn, get rid of destroy after death so it doesn't accidentally destroy you if you wait too long. But yeah, that's variables in a nutshell. A few different ways of how you can use them. Hopefully that gives you enough starting ground to build out your own stuff. There's so much you can do on top of what I have just shown you how to do. Again, if you guys have any other requests or questions, leave them in the comment section. I'll make sure to try and address them in a future video. And thanks for watching, guys.